I used to think loyalty meant something in the corporate world. 3 years at the same mid-sized marketing firm taught me otherwise. I wasn't flashy or loud like the sales guys who strutted through the office bragging about closing deals. I was the quiet one, the person who made sure campaigns got finished, emails were answered, and our clients didn't walk away mid-project. My boss, Greg, loved to call me his right hand, which was ironic considering how fast he'd later stab me in the back. Greg was one of those people who'd charm a room and drain it at the same time. Perfect hair, designer suits, expensive cologne, he carried himself like the company owed him oxygen. The higher-ups adored him because he could talk circles around anyone. He'd take credit for my work, then toss me a great job, champ afterward like I was some intern. I let it slide because I thought it'd pay off later. Spoiler, it didn't. When the company shifted to hybrid work, Greg got paranoid. He started showing up earlier, checking who logged in when, sending friendly reminders about productivity. I brushed it off until the day he installed activity monitoring software. Everyone complained, but he told us it was to keep accountability consistent. What it really did was give him an excuse to micromanage. Things got worse after he started disappearing for client meetings that lasted entire afternoons. The rest of the team picked up the slack, and he'd swoop in at 5 p.m. to act like the hero fixing our delays. It was frustrating, but I needed the paycheck. Student loans don't care about office politics. Then came the first accusation. He called me into his office one morning, arms crossed, face serious. "I've been reviewing your activity logs," he said. "You've got multiple 2-hour gaps during work hours. Care to explain?" I blinked. "Those were client calls, Greg, the ones you told me to handle because you were out." He leaned back, pretending to think. "Interesting. No recorded meetings in the system. No messages. Looks like you're logging hours you're not working. That's time theft, you know." I felt my stomach drop. "You can't be serious." But he was. He printed out my activity summary, black and white proof that the software couldn't track phone calls. "I'm giving you a warning," he said smoothly. "Next time it's termination." That was the first time I saw it, the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He wasn't correcting me. He was setting me up. I walked out shaking, trying to convince myself it was just stress. But deep down, I knew. Greg wasn't watching me because he cared about productivity. He was watching me because he needed a scapegoat. A week later, he found his excuse. And this time, he didn't bother pretending it was just a warning. It happened on a Friday, the universal day for bad news. Everyone in the office was already halfway checked out for the weekend, and Greg had that smug, restless energy he always got before he pulled something dramatic. At around 3 p.m., I got the email. Subject: Performance Review, Urgent. From Greg Turner, CCHR. My stomach sank. No context, no warning, just a meeting invite in 15 minutes. When I walked into the conference room, HR was already there, polite smiles, paper folders, the kind of atmosphere that smelled like this isn't a discussion. Greg sat at the head of the table, tapping a pen against a legal pad like a man rehearsing his victory speech. "Have a seat," he said. His tone was calm, too calm. HR started talking first, reading off a script about performance inconsistencies and documented misuse of company time. I barely heard her. My eyes were on Greg. He was nodding along like some disappointed father. "I don't understand," I interrupted. "You know I've been handling 3 campaigns on my own. Ask any client, I haven't missed a deadline." Greg clasped his hands. "Look, this isn't personal. We've noticed gaps in your work logs and the data doesn't lie. We have to enforce company policy." "The data's wrong," I said, my voice cracking. "It doesn't record phone calls, you know that." He sighed dramatically. "We've given you multiple warnings." "Once you gave me one." HR cleared her throat gently. "Regardless, the decision's been finalized. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. It will disable your access by end of day. There it was, terminated. The word felt unreal, detached, like it wasn't even about me. Greg stood up and offered a rehearsed line about appreciating my time with the company. I didn't shake his hand. I just stared at him. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. By the time I packed my things, the office was silent. No one made eye contact. Everyone knew what had happened, but in corporate land, no one risks guilt by association. Outside, the sun was blinding. I sat in my car, staring at the cardboard box of my stuff, the same company mug I'd gotten at orientation, the framed quote that said, "Hard work always pays off." It would have been funny if it didn't sting so much. Then I remembered something. Greg's client lunches, those 4-hour disappearances he billed as business meetings. The ones where he'd conveniently forget his laptop but always take the company credit card. Maybe it was the anger. Maybe it was survival instinct. But in that moment, I knew one thing: if Greg thought he could end my career to protect himself, he'd picked the wrong person to screw over. That night, I decided if Greg wanted to play dirty, I'd find out exactly what he'd been doing with all that company money, and I wouldn't stop until I had proof. Anger has a strange way of clearing your mind. That night, I didn't cry or mope. I opened my laptop. I wasn't going down without knowing exactly what Greg had done. The first thing I checked was my email. It hadn't deactivated my account yet, rookie mistake. I searched his name, filtering for attachments and shared files. Most were harmless: project plans, client notes, the usual corporate noise. But then I found something tucked away in an old shared drive he'd forgotten to lock, a folder called Vendor Expenses Q1. Inside were PDFs of invoices and credit card receipts. At first, it looked normal: hotels, restaurants, travel reimbursements. Then one name kept popping up: Laurel D., with the label Vendor Relations Consultant. Funny thing, we didn't have a vendor named Laurel. I opened one of the receipts. It was for a business dinner at a downtown steakhouse. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 hotel room at the attached Marriott, paid for with the company card. I clicked through more. Another dinner, another hotel, dates that lined up perfectly with those client lunches Greg disappeared for. Then I found the smoking gun, an email thread between Greg and Laurel from his personal Gmail, accidentally forwarded to his work address. Her tone wasn't professional. "Had a great time last night. You make business trips so much more fun." Thanks. And his reply: "Keep the receipts. I'll code them as consulting expenses." I sat back, heart pounding. The same man who accused me of time theft was literally billing his affair to the company. I didn't want revenge right away. I wanted strategy. If I rushed it, he'd spin the story like he always did. I needed airtight proof, something HR couldn't ignore or bury. So I started collecting screenshots, dates, the company expense summaries that matched every single receipt. By midnight, I had a digital folder labeled Project Karma. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been fired for stealing time. Yet here was Greg, stealing thousands in company money for his secret side life. Before logging off, I sent everything to my personal email. Then, just in case, I backed it all up to a USB drive. I stared at my monitor for a long time. The anger was still there, but it had changed, sharpened into something colder. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the problem Greg didn't see coming. The next morning, I called HR and scheduled a follow-up conversation about my termination, and I brought a little folder marked evidence. When I walked back into the office the following Monday, I could feel the stares. Some people smiled awkwardly, others looked away entirely. News travels fast in corporate spaces, especially when someone gets fired and then shows up again like they own the place. The receptionist blinked at me. Can I help you?" "I have a meeting with HR," I said calmly. "Follow up on my termination." She nodded, clearly uncomfortable, and buzzed me through. The HR manager, Sandra, met me in the hallway with that professional half-smile people wear when they expect drama. "We thought everything was settled," she said. "Oh, it will be," I replied. We sat down in the same glass-walled conference room where Greg had fired me. He wasn't there yet. I'd made sure of that. I wanted HR's full attention before he walked into the trap. "I brought some additional context about my so-called time theft," I began. I slid the USB drive across the table. "You might want to open that before we go any further." Sandra frowned but plugged it in. Her screen filled with folders, receipts, credit card statements, email screenshots. I sat back, watching her expression shift from curiosity to confusion to dawning horror. "Where did you get this?" she asked finally. "It's all from a shared company drive," I said. "I just organized it. Turns out Greg's been billing personal expenses, hotels, dinners, even plane tickets, to a non-existent vendor consultant." She scrolled faster. "These dates, these match his travel reimbursements." "Exactly," I said. "And here's the fun part. I was fired for time theft during the same week he expensed a 4-star weekend with someone named Laurel." Sandra exhaled slowly, rubbing her forehead. "This is serious." "Yeah," I said. "And you should also know I've kept copies of everything. So before this gets swept under the rug, maybe we should bring him in." Right on cue, there was a knock on the door. Greg walked in confident, smirking, like he was about to shut me down again. That expression lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then he saw the files on the screen. "Greg," Sandra said coldly, "would you care to explain these?" His face drained of color. That's vendor documentation for consulting." "Vendor named Laurel D. who doesn't exist in our system," she shot back. He stammered something about personal business overlap, but it was over. I'd already won. Sandra told him to wait outside while she reviewed the findings. He left without making eye contact. When the door closed, she turned to me. "I can't promise what happens next, but this won't be ignored. Thank you for bringing this forward." "Just doing what Greg always said," I replied, "being accountable." By the next morning, word spread that Greg had been placed on administrative leave, and I had a feeling the real fallout was just beginning. When I woke up the next morning, my inbox was a storm of messages, some from coworkers I hadn't spoken to in months. "Did you hear what happened to Greg? HR pulled him into a meeting, and he never came back. Dude, what did you do?" I didn't respond to any of them. I just scrolled through each one, smiling a little more with every message. By mid-morning, the company's internal chat lit up with the announcement. Subject: staffing update. Effective immediately, Greg Turner has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal audit. All client communications will be temporarily reassigned. That was corporate speak for "he's done." I won't lie, it felt good. Not just because I'd been vindicated, but because the same people who'd watched me get fired without a word were now whispering about his downfall. Karma had a way of making the office coffee taste better. Still, I didn't celebrate, not yet. Greg was slippery. He had friends in upper management, and I knew he'd try to spin this as a misunderstanding. So I kept my head down and stayed patient. 2 days later, HR called me back in. Sandra looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from reading too many emails labeled urgent. "We concluded the audit," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Everything you provided checked out. Greg falsified expense reports, used company funds for personal travel, and violated multiple compliance policies. He won't be returning." I let out a slow breath. "So that's it?" "Not quite," she said, lowering her voice. "The executives are impressed you brought this forward. They want to offer you your position back, same salary, plus back pay for the period since your termination." For a moment I couldn't speak. "You're serious?" She nodded. "And if you're open to it, there's talk of promoting you into a senior coordinator role." I wanted to laugh. A week ago I was a liability. Now I was an example of integrity. "I'll think about it," I said, standing. Truthfully, I already knew my answer. I wasn't going back. Not because I was bitter, but because that office, that job, that version of myself, all of it felt small now. When I left the building, I passed Greg's old office. His nameplate was gone, his desk cleared. The blinds were half open, and for a second I could still picture him sitting there, smirking, certain he was untouchable. Funny how fast things change. That evening, as I packed up my things for good, I got a call from an unknown number, and the voice on the other end reminded me that Greg wasn't finished yet. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, and after the week I'd had, I assumed it was another recruiter or a telemarketer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello." There was silence at first, then a low, familiar voice. "You think you're clever, don't you?" It was Greg. My grip tightened around the phone. "Pretty sure HR disagrees with your definition of clever." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is over? You cost me my career, my reputation. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yeah," I said flatly. "I stopped you from stealing." "You don't get it," he hissed. "People like me don't stay down for long. And when I'm back, I'll make sure everyone knows who really caused this mess." "Good luck with that," I said. "I kept copies of everything." There was a pause, the kind that tells you someone's run out of power but hasn't realized it yet. Then he muttered something I couldn't catch and hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, pulse hammering. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wasn't scared, exactly, just angry that even in defeat, Greg still needed to play the victim. That night I forwarded the call log and a short summary to Sandra, just to cover myself. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Thank you for letting us know. We'll make sure he's reminded of his confidentiality agreement." The next few days were quiet. I kept expecting some follow-up, an email, a rumor, something. Instead, life moved on. HR formally reinstated my position, and the executives sent me a politely worded apology for the miscommunication. But I didn't go back. Instead, I accepted a new offer from one of our rival firms, a job that paid better and didn't involve watching my back every day. On my last morning in the old office, I came in early to clear out my desk. The air felt lighter without Greg's cologne hanging in it. I slipped my badge onto the counter and turned toward the elevator when I noticed something on the floor, a folded piece of paper with my name written on it. My first instinct was to leave it, but curiosity won. I picked it up. Inside, written in Greg's neat handwriting, was one line. "Don't think you're the hero, you just play dirtier than I did." I stared at it for a moment, then crumpled it up and dropped it in the trash. Heroes didn't matter. Results did. Later that week, an unexpected email from corporate HR landed in my inbox, one that revealed Greg's downfall had reached much higher up the ladder than either of us ever imagined. The email's subject line was short but heavy: "Follow-up regarding internal audit findings." I opened it half expecting another apology, maybe some routine compliance notice. Instead, it was from one of the senior HR directors, the kind whose name you only saw on company-wide announcements. "We wanted to inform you that the investigation into Mr. Turner's conduct has expanded. Evidence suggests multiple members of management were aware of or complicit in approving his falsified expense reports. Please keep this matter confidential as proceedings continue." I read it twice, then a third time. So it wasn't just Greg, he hadn't acted alone. I shouldn't have been surprised. Greg had always bragged about connections, the kind of people who made his mistakes disappear. I just never realized how literal that was. The email went on to say that the company would be restructuring leadership roles, and that I might be contacted for a statement. In other words, the higher-ups were finally cleaning house. When I finished reading, I leaned back in my chair and laughed, quietly, but with real relief this time. For months, I'd felt powerless under people like Greg. Now the system that protected him was finally devouring itself. A few days later, I did get that call. It wasn't from HR, it was from an internal investigator. The man thanked me for coming forward and asked me to confirm the authenticity of the documents I'd shared. When I told him I still had backups, his tone shifted. "You'd be surprised how rare that is," he said. "Most people don't keep records. You made our job a lot easier." By the end of that week, Greg's name vanished from the company website entirely. Two managers resigned for personal reasons, and an internal memo leaked online hinting at widespread misuse of company funds. It spread like wildfire on LinkedIn, with hundreds of employees commenting things like "finally" and "about time accountability came around." Watching it unfold didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like justice, slow and inevitable. That Friday night, I grabbed drinks with a few old coworkers. Everyone wanted to know if the rumors were true. When I confirmed, the table erupted into a mix of laughter and disbelief. One guy raised his glass. "To Greg," he said, smirking. "May his next job have less room service." We laughed, but inside I just felt done. Not angry, not even proud, just finished. When I got home, I opened my laptop and stared at the folder still sitting on my desktop. Project Karma. My little war chest of proof and patience. I hovered over it for a second, then dragged it to the recycle bin. It was time to move on. A few weeks later, as I started my new job, a final message from corporate HR landed in my inbox, and it carried one last twist that closed the story for good. The email arrived on a quiet Monday morning, just as I was settling into my new job. The subject line read, "Final update, internal case resolution." I clicked it expecting another bland corporate statement. Instead, it began with words I never thought I'd read. "Following the completion of our investigation, the Executive Board has concluded disciplinary action against all parties involved. Mr. Turner and 3 senior managers have been permanently barred from future employment within the company or any of its subsidiaries. A formal note of appreciation will be placed in your record for your professionalism and integrity." I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. They didn't just fire Greg, they erased him. The man who once strutted through the office like he owned the place was now a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms. I sat back and smiled, not out of triumph but relief. For months, I'd felt small, helpless against someone who manipulated rules and people with ease. Now the balance had shifted. The truth had done what I couldn't. It leveled the field. A second email pinged in my inbox a few minutes later, from Sandra, the HR manager who'd first helped me expose him. "Just wanted to say thank you again. What you did took courage. We're rebuilding, and your case reminded a lot of people why integrity matters." It was strange seeing the same people who once doubted me now treating me like some moral compass. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt free. That night, I took a walk around my new office's neighborhood. It was raining lightly, the kind of soft drizzle that made the city lights smear like watercolor. I passed a cafe and caught my reflection in the window, tired, older maybe, but lighter than I'd looked in a long time. For a moment, I thought about Greg. Was he sitting in some dim apartment somewhere, rewriting the story in his head? Probably. People like him always need to be the victim. But that wasn't my concern anymore. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and opened my laptop one last time. My desktop was empty now. No Project Karma, no evidence folders, no ghosts of that old job, just a clean slate. I closed the lid, exhaled, and finally allowed myself to feel proud. Not because I'd destroyed Greg, but because I'd chosen truth over silence. This wasn't a revenge story after all. It was a freedom story.